right, is this on? Check one. Yes, we are on. Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to the Graveyard Shift. Thank you for being here. I hope it was a good lunch. So we're Sunrise Animation Studios. We're really happy to be here sharing with AYON this week, and we want to share a little bit about our journey, scaling pipeline, USD, and global data sync. But first, before we get there, a little bit about us. Firstly, I'm Tim. I'm one of the producers at Sunrise. I've been at Sunrise for about 10 or 11 years. With me is Dexter, Pipeline Supervisor. Next to him, Kevin, CG Soup, and Chris, who's an R&D engineer and previously head of tech at our studio. So we're going to cover a couple of different areas today. I'm going to talk a little bit about us as a studio and what we're up to. Dex will talk about pipeline, Kev about USD, and Chris will cover sync. So first thing to say about Sunrise is we are not from Hollywood. In fact, you could not possibly get further from Hollywood if you tried. This is where our company was founded some 25 years ago in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is best known for its incredibly beautiful vistas, not so much for its film industry. And our founders, Phil and Jackie Cunningham, were farmers. And as one does when you're a farmer, you decide to get into the movie business. And they had an idea for a film, wrote a book, The Legend of the Sky Kingdom, and then proceeded to stop motion animate this film over the next 3 years using the street art of Zimbabwe's incredibly talented street artists, and accidentally made Africa's first animated feature film. They didn't know it at the time, but they found out afterwards. And that gave birth to Sunrise Animation. From there, they've thought, well, stop motion is a little challenging. Let's try CG instead, and learned how to do CG. They found the two guys in Zimbabwe that had heard about CG, and they started making the first season of Jungle Beat. And now, after some 11 or 12 years, I think we've made about 100 episodes of this little show. At some point along that journey, as I think many of us know, Zimbabwe ran into really difficult political times, and the studio moved from Zimbabwe down to Cape Town. And that's around the time that we joined. And then over these last 10, 11, 12 years, we've made a lot more Jungle Beat. We partnered with a studio in Indonesia, Infinite Studios, to make 52 episodes of Monkey and Trunk. We made a wild television series with Juventus Football Club about their mascot, a magical zebra called Jay. And then in 2020, we finally got back to our heartland, which is making feature films. And we did our first feature film, Jungle Beat, the movie. And from there, in 2023, the second Jungle Beat movie. And that's really been our journey, is learning how to tell stories and how to tell stories at scale, from non-dialogue, 5-minute television, through to feature films. So we're now in Cape Town, and that's where we all live and we're based. This is our studio. We're at the very southernmost tip of Africa, southwestmost tip of Africa, a little town called Noordhoek. That's our studio. And as you walk in our studio, there's this massive map on the wall. And it's a completely made-up map, but we love maps. And it lists our values, one of whom you can see Phil pointing out there, explore creativity. Another one in the middle is seek out humility, organic but organized. And we have these values that we hold really, really core to who we are as people and who we are as a studio. But they can really be summarized as this. We're here to take on giants. We are hopeful that there's an opportunity for us, small as we are, at the bottom of the world, to tell stories that others aren't, and give that a go. And that's what we've been doing over the last 3 years, is we've been making this movie called David, which came out in theaters worldwide in December. And the premise is very simple, at least as we pitched it internally. It was, let's do David versus Goliath, but let's do it animated. Oh, and let's make it a musical as well. Having done stories about animals, now let's just jump straight to humans singing songs for a feature length. And I'd love to show you the trailer for that film.
Stronghold of my life, whom shall I fear? Though the arrows may fly, by night and by day,
adventure.
I will not be hurt.
Celebrate Christmas at the movies. Buy tickets now at angel.com/David. Exclusively in theaters, December 19th.
Yeah, thank you. It still gets me watching that trailer because we've just poured so many years of our life into making that film. And if you followed any of its story in the press over the last year or two, you would know that it's gone through some incredible twists and turns. But ultimately, got picked up by Angel in October last year. Within 12 weeks, we were on 3,118 theaters across the US and Canada, and a number of other countries as well. We've just closed our theatrical run at $87 million, which is just completely mind-blowing. And we opened at number 2, behind Avatar, on the US box office. Truly, not to overstate it, but a David versus Goliath story. And one that we didn't expect, but one that we embraced wholeheartedly as an opportunity to do what we love, which is telling stories and trying to tell those with integrity, at scale, at quality, and to do that, as a group that have journeyed together from being a really, really small studio to now being a little bit more of a medium-sized studio. So let's talk a little bit about that medium. So we started in South Africa, and I mentioned that we've done some work with vendor studios, but for the David project, it was direct hire, end-to-end, from script to final delivery, all in-house. And in-house, as it turns out, meant the planet. Our days started with Miguel Campos, our rigging lead in Tokyo, and it ended in Vancouver with our team out there, which included a lighting lead, a global endeavor. And it meant that pretty much 24 hours a day, there was something happening in production. And we, in South Africa, down the middle, kind of just caught the overlapping Venn diagram of the two hemispheres. Throughout the project, we had some 345 artists on the show, and we peaked at 240 crew. There were about 100 in Cape Town at peak and 140 out of studio. 25, 26 countries represented. And this was just an incredible journey, and we're really excited to share a bit of that with you today, because we have this challenge as a studio of Sunrise's size, which is this picture, right? We're not the nimble, tiny speedboat on the left, much as we feel like that and much as we want to be. We're operating at a scale where there are implications, and it's slower to turn the ship. But we're also not an aircraft carrier. We don't have the might, nor the budget, nor the time to be the scale of an aircraft carrier. So we sit sometimes at this sort of intersection, or this no man's land of the off-the-shelf tools not being enough for us, but the completely custom solution being out of reach. And so for us, as we approached David from a pipeline point of view and from a CG point of view, it was really about cherry-picking what we needed to do to deliver this film. And now, on the other side of delivering this film, we've been able to take a step back, look at that journey, and make some decisions about the path ahead for pipeline and for CG. So to share a bit about pipeline with us, and turn it over to Dexter.
Cool. Thank you, Tim. Hi, I'm Dexter, head of pipeline at Sunrise. So yeah, after David, we had a pipeline that lasted about 10 years, been working on a pipeline, like a small studio, small pipeline. It's not very complicated, we're all in-house, it's very intimate, you kind of know everyone that's there. But on David, we scaled very rapidly into production. And after it, we kind of realized that we had problems with what we were doing. It just didn't work at scale, especially globally. Like, stuff changes when you have to worry about people in different time zones, etc. I'll get into these details about that now. So what we did is, after David, is we wrote an internal white paper. So just a way to put our thoughts onto paper of what do we actually want, what do we care about, what do artists want, etc. Just to figure out how we're going to do our next project, how we're going to do it again, because we did not want to do what we did the way we did it exactly. The stuff we liked, stuff we didn't like, etc. into the whole white paper. Some of the things we wanted to address was like data validation, version control, review cycle management, just making information easier to find, communication, and like to always be rendering. Like always render, always see the final results as quickly as possible, and also to make it easy to actually see what data goes where, who needs what, etc. So after the white paper, we were looking, we're going to rebuild pipeline. And that's going to take a while. So if we're really looking around, last year we saw AYON at FMX. We saw the VOD, we saw them like looking through it, and it seemed quite interesting. And then we were like also looking like, cool, we're going to start on to what we really need to do in production, like what we actually need to build. And those things were a user resolver, version management, full push by default, database with interrelationships, and use integration with front end. So I'll go into these points now. So just some context on our old pipeline. So when we did a shift from AYON to AYON. Our old pipeline was, these are some similarities, like we did stuff in Sun Houdini, AYON Houdini, Sun Maya, AYON Maya, etc. So it's like some concepts that are similar to us and that AYON shared. We also have a very technical, our technical staff are very Houdini leaning. So we very much try to lean into Houdini to do not all our tooling, but some of the bits that can be put into Houdini, we put into Houdini. Because it's just more visual, it's easy to manage. You don't want to have everything as code, because that's always difficult to maintain sometimes. Version management, if it's slightly DCC, sometimes it's easier, sometimes not. Really depends. So the details about version control, because this is quite an important thing to us, and this actually goes back to the points, some of the points on the white paper is, when I say full push pipeline by default, what I mean is we would have versions, but we'd never use the versions in productions really. They're more of a backup mechanism. Artists would only generally have like one file, and that's a file artists would use for an asset or data like your mesh. You have one character mesh, and that's it. And if when you publish, that mesh gets stomped. And now that starts causing problems in scale, which I'll talk about. One of the reasons why we did this is in a small studio, you kind of want to fail fast, fix fast. So as soon as something goes wrong, someone does publish, you want to see it, you want to see if it's breaking stuff. If you're rendering all the time, you can see very quickly, oh, that publish you did was bad. Let's roll back. And then just like similarities again of how the structuring works. Like you can see on the left here, the old pipeline was a version managed and then there's a versionless file. AYON has a very similar concept of you have version publishers and then you have a hero version which is then linked to whichever version you want. So we don't really have linking. We have to swap between our versionless to a hero, but AYON does, which is pretty useful for us. So why a lot of this being problems? So I said, old pipeline was fine for small scale, broke at larger scale, especially time zones. We had issues with configurability. Everything required a developer to configure files, etc. A supervisor can't just go change a setting. You kind of need to get the developer involved to do it. And then like the full push pipeline thing like for example of that is since our entire render base was in South Africa, our main studio, and we've applied in artists in, or actually any artist in say LA for example, they do a publish. Now the render will pop up in South Africa while we're sleeping, and then the render will just suddenly change. And now if something's wrong, because they're in a completely different time zone and there's no support, you can't just go and like, oh wait, let's roll back. You kind of just have to now wait for the next guy to wake up to deal with the issues. And then there's other issues with multiple time zone stuff. And then, because we didn't have the ways to track data, like who exactly needed what data, which starts causing a problem for things with sync. We would end up syncing like all the data to a lot of places across the planet, which is very expensive, both from just a storage perspective and bandwidth. Chris will go into details about like the data sync stuff, but when you're trying to push multiple terabytes a day of data across the internet, it can kind of hurt people, like just interacting. And since a lot of the studio is off-site, So both for artists like remoting into your studio or into AWS regions or whatever, if you're killing your bandwidth for sync, it means your artist can't really connect to your office to work. You only have so much bandwidth. So yeah, that's some context up to that. Oh, and I think this is we're a very USD based studio. Like our entire pipeline is USD based. I actually don't have a slide for this, but to give a little context for that is we've been using USD concepts. So for like, I forget exactly when we started using a concept of USD, but not actual USD. We started adopting USD, I think it was like 7 years ago or something. We used it for like file formats initially. We did quite a relatively slow adoption with file formats. We expanded a bit more. And now that we're on David, we went full shots, assets, everything. The full stack is all USD all the way down with variant management, live RPs, etc. We have a whole section on USD, which Kev will cover. So with all that, why did we actually choose AYON? I said we saw AYON at the FMX VODs, and we realized it actually ticks a lot of our boxes, kind of like what the Jellyfish guys had, where he's like, it has that, it has that. We want these things, it actually has them. And we didn't want to rebuild from scratch. Like it had the DB backend stuff, which would help us with our tracking data, which was really important for sync. And the nice things that it had like the tracking tools with view tools, etc., which, because it's open source and you'd have access to actual tooling, you can extend it yourself. Because we don't want to build a thing from scratch, like a whole tracking tool. And our previous tooling stuff we were using, we weren't overly happy with some things about it. So some small things nice of AYON is like the configurability in the UI. Now, Kev, for example, can go and change some settings. Doesn't need a pipeline rollout. I don't need to go push changes, pull changes, deploy, etc. And also because you have access to the web front end of it, you can just extend. You can add add-ons. Like this, for example, is a UI made for the variant management between assets, because like you can see the model. This asset's going to use these variants of the model in the room and look, etc. So ultimately, with AYON, after the white paper and everything, and all our investigations and testing with AYON, we found out that actually did start ticking all our boxes of what we wanted. So this kind of was like, we had like an opinion on pipeline, and AYON relatively falls in line with our opinion. Some things we're changing, some things we're not. But kind of like with pipeline, like everyone has an opinion on this stuff. And we also have an opinion on USD, since USD is back end of our, like a core component of our pipeline. We have Kevin for that.
Thank you, Dex. I'm Kevin, I'm the CG Supervisor at Sunrise. And at Sunrise, we're continually building onto and refining our USD workflows between shows. And we always want to make sure that between these shows and in places where we have time to develop, that we're studying modern standards, recommendations from things like ASWF, and just other talks from other studios, to try and stay close to these ideas, these concepts, in both asset and shot construction. And yeah, just basically the common ideas of the time with USD. And at the end of David, we were quite proud of and quite happy with the way that we've put together our USD pipeline and the way it was set up. It served us really well going into our current project. And we made another iteration, just making further judgments to optimize the number of layers that we were introducing into our pipeline, the number of composition arcs or the exact choice of composition arcs, etc. Over here, I don't know if you can see it super well, but these are kind of just like little graphs of our asset structure and our shot structure. I think this is amended a little bit to like how we want to work in this production that we're currently in. But the way we did it on David was a very, very simple approach. I'm talking about shots now, where if we were making a shot USD structure, we had a little template of USD files that were pre-layered into a shot USD, and all those these would be department contribution files. And on shot creation in our production tracking software, we would literally just copy paste that file into pub. And that would be our kind of initial entry point, just a bunch of stub files that departments could add their contributions to their layer. And this was nice because we could maintain control of the contribution order. We had this template and we could just roll it in. And it was also kind of nice because we didn't have to worry about, well, when FX publishes, where do we shove in that layer? And when Look publishes, where do we shove in that layer contribution order? It's already determined, and we don't have to integrate anything. But one of the problems is that there's often a bunch of just redundant stub files and layers that just never get contributed to. And we found AYON solution really elegant, where in the publish integration step, it is adding these contributions in a particular order, and that's kind of that little snippet that you see over there where we can, in the AYON web config, we can just say this department goes in this order and be happy about it. So it's a bit of shots, and I'll get into assets as well, but this is the structure that we need for our pipeline. So we can't lose this functionality, and we can't adopt a new pipeline and lose all of the USD structure that we've built up. So one of the things is then working with input guys. Our partnership with Input's been really great and really important. And the key thing is that most of what we're trying to do as a studio is that we're trying to do things in a way that we can actually feed back into the greater AYON ecosystem. We don't want to be Sunrise-centric. We don't want to be quirky or introduce like specific studio isms. That's our kind of overall goal. And we've been working with the input guys and Roy especially to improve specific USD features for our use, but always with the goal that it benefits everyone using AYON, not just us. Now, this is not always possible. At certain points, you just have to you're in the weeds and you've got to dig yourself out of them. But our general philosophy is working towards the greater ecosystem. Now, we're actively in development with our current project, and we're just getting to battle test some of these features now. But the fact that we've been able to kind of know what we need, plan it, and collaborate with Input has been really great. So you saw this little graph earlier, and I'm not going to force you to squint and read it, but basically what it is it is a nested hierarchical dependence of USD layers within a shot context. So really, way at the bottom of the graph, you see on the bottom left, there's a global USD. This is a product that is published into a library type space, and this just holds like show wide render settings, any pertinent metadata that we care about, like what OCIO version are we tracking, or anything like that. We may not use some of these things going forwards because we have these things in AYON, but they were useful to us previously. But anyway, this global thing, it just holds some of these kind of presets for the show USD related presets. Then we get up to a sequence level USD, and this is mostly just to allow departments to contribute opinions across an entire sequence of shots, rather than do the same thing in every single shot tediously and create too many files. And then finally, that layers into a shot context. So the shot reads from the sequence, reads from the global. And I guess skipping over the middle, looking at the right-hand side over here, we now have this collect USD asset contributions, which is really flexible, where you can say, hey, I've got this kind of product, USD shot, and I would like to sublayer a USD sequence file into this. I want to pick a version, I want the latest version or the hero version. And so when that shot product is made, this layering can happen. And then likewise, we can go and pick a particular URI path instead of picking a particular product. And we can just say, hey, for our global, there's the URI, put that in either when the shot is made or when the sequence is made. And then in the middle over here, one of the things that we ran into was, well, our look department is classically an asset department, but they often dig into shots. They just want to kind of get at a triplanar and scale it more, and, kind of increase the resolution because it was looking a little bad. And so that's a shot opinion for that department. And we would have needed to create, like a shot look department and a asset look department. But now there's a kind of a section in the middle where you can scope these department contributions to be able to contribute to assets or shots or both. So that was a really nice thing to have added. But what happens when we do need to customize for our quirky behaviors? Here we see an example of, on the left-hand side, of the asset interface that AYON will create by default. You've got your payload in there, and your bits of metadata. But we need something a little bit more like the middle image. And I'll talk about that in a bit. So here we've got an array of payload asset dependencies. This is a USD asset info thing, and where this is useful is to say, like, well, if I've got this house asset and it's got an assembly in that house, there's a chair in it. It'd be nice to know about it, and that will be useful for things like sync later. We also have it can get really deeply connected, but we've kind of got this kind of basic level class inheritance structure where we can define that specific asset inherits from its more generic asset descriptor, which inherits from a type of asset, in this case a prop. So we set up our inherits in here. And we also loft variance sets and their variants described within other files of that asset onto the asset interface, so that if you unload a payload, you can still display meaningful data in Solaris without having to actually load that payload. Then the next little section here is we need to process our Maya models to have a unique guide, proxy, LOD meshes, all configured in the way that we want them. And so that's a challenge, and how are we going to be able to do these kinds of things? So in our previous pipeline, we had this concept of routines, and this would be basically a sub-process that just ran Hython, and it would auto-generate proxy lot meshes on model publish. And then on the anim side, we would wrap our high-res clothing onto low-res rig meshes on that action. And this is probably sounding familiar to you, because if you would have, if you watched Roy's talk in the morning, you would know that I'm probably heading towards something called workflows. But before we get there, just to kind of explain again, like our studio TDs are, we're a Houdini studio, and we do a lot of this kind of thing in Houdini. And USD-wise, Solaris provides our team with this flexibility and control without needing a developer and a whole suite of USD API scripts doing these things. So this is easy to prototype. It's easy to debug and test via these nodes. And it's easy to extend and modify with more complex features, and you don't have to, kind of rely on the fact that it's like, that guy wrote that thing, he understands it. It's just Houdini, you open it up, you look at the nodes, and you add what you need to add, or you change what you need to change. So I'm dangling the workflow carrot for just a bit longer. But how do we kind of get at this in Houdini? Well, if you look at the bottom set of pictures, this would just be an HDA, and that HDA would take that model publish, and it would do Houdini stuff. It would generate LODs, it would generate proxies. It would set all sorts of opinions that we care about setting. And in our previous pipeline, we just because it was all full push, we just said, hey, there's the publish file and just save over it. And then on the top over here, to kind of get this asset interface the way we wanted, it's also just Solaris stuff, doing a bit of traversal and things like that. So one thing to notice, just on the theme of working with the input guys to kind of get things, we found during this creation of some of our variants, in this case a base model variant, that because we're creating LOD meshes, they kind of are models. And so we ran into if you're familiar with USD, geek speak, liver peas issue, which is really just a way to say there were conflicts in the composition, the order of composition of these things, and so we needed a way to be able to control where exactly the LOD landed within in the reference list. And so the strength order, this was a good one to just say like, hey, I want this contribution or this product to sit exactly that position in the references. Okay, so finally, workflows. So we've been kind of, we don't have the official thing that you guys saw this morning. We've been kind of testing it, and so this may not look familiar, and this diagram is just a mirror thing. But essentially, it's what are we doing now? I've talked about what we did, but how are we actually using workflows? How does it actually look? How does it work? And really, it's just a publish plugin exports USD from the DCC. We've got an extractor that just runs a sub process. The AYON workflow starts. It runs Python. And then within Python, we can load our HDA, and that itself just runs a full publish. As you can see over here, the kind of bottom middle image, that's your AYON publisher, right? So there's AYON ROPS inside of there. And that in turn, that kind of yellow layer spins off another workflow, which will edit our asset interface and kind of customize it in the exact way that we need. And these things just return through their publish actions right up back into Maya, and Maya can just continue its publish process going through either the rest of the extractors, but then into integration, and then we have our publish. We do have to do some shenanigans with ignoring reintegration or integration again from Maya, but I'll leave that for questions if you're interested in that. So this is great because we don't have to go like, oh, AYON is doing things a certain way, but we need another way, so we need to fork. We don't have to do that. We can just extend, and that's awesome. So we have our happy little asset. It's got a proxy. It's got a guide. And it's got an asset interface that has all of the features that we love. So at this point, it's clear that Sunrise puts a lot of importance on USD as the backbone of its CG data pipeline. But we still need to solve the problem of moving these files and their dependencies all around the globe. And for that, I'll hand over to Chris.
Thanks, Kevin. So, how's it guys? I'm Chris. Was the head of tech, now doing some R&D work. But at this point, it's clear that we obviously care about USD in our pipeline, but we're no longer a single studio. You can see all those dots around the world. The orange dots are real humans. They're doing work, they're connecting to a workstation. And we decided to make our lives slightly difficult, and we didn't restrict where anyone could work from. What I mean by that is we had departments spread over multiple continents. We had dependent departments in different time zones. A, that's quite difficult on the production side, but B, it means that you have to be able to get data everywhere around the world pretty quickly. So what we had is we have Cape Town, which is our primary region, and then we had these 4 AWS studios, which acted as just virtual studios that we sync data to. And we use a system called Brasilio Sync, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. But yeah, this isn't our first rodeo when it comes to sync. We've been a partner of Brasilio for almost a decade in various forms. And that started with a studio-to-studio sync. So as Tim mentioned, we had partner studios in both Mauritius and in Indonesia. But that was a much simpler use case. We sent them data, they did work, they sent us back the result. Very much like any of the VFX guys in the rooms all know. And then we built a studio and moved into it, and it's a beautiful studio. It's one you saw earlier. 2 months before COVID happened, and we all got sent home. So as we had to send people home, that sync had to expand. We had to sync certain stuff to people's workstations. We had to expand slightly more. And then post-pandemic, we truly went global, ended up in 25 plus countries, region to region sync, and also selective sync. Now, I want to reiterate this. It worked. We made a movie. We did all these things. There were some inefficiencies with doing that, which I'll get into now. But it was kind of built in a pre-pandemic way. We knew where things, where our locations were. These were just clusters of artists. But we ended up syncing a lot more data than we needed to sync. And I'll get into that now. But storage in AWS is not cheap. And the thing is, we produce a lot of data every day, which meant that you had to sync a lot of data every day. Sometimes you had to wait for things, sometimes that happened. But on David, we synced a total of 5.2 petabytes of data. We had to resolve around 600 million file changes across the show. And on average, our daily data generation was about 10 terabytes a day. We had single files that were quite a bit bigger than this, waterfall sims, etc. So now you can imagine this gets quite difficult when you have a lighter in LA who's rendering in Cape Town, who is working with a comper somewhere else. So the reason this was more difficult is the best way I can explain this is we knew the street the data was on, but not the exact house. So you would have seen in our USD layering that we're extremely USD-centric, and those USDs need other USDs, and there's quite a hierarchical structure. So we would know someone needed the David asset, but not the specific look variant or the specific groom variant that they needed. So you ended up syncing quite a bit of extra files that were not necessary in that thing. And yeah, this was a massive infrastructure undertaking. We did about 120 million core hours in approximately 7 months of render. We ended up with 5.3 million images through that time for a 144,000 frame movie. So it was quite a lot of layers, quite a lot of iteration, and a lot of these frames had to go back overseas. So when we look at it, the reason we had to sync our extra data was pretty much we needed proper USD resolution. We needed proper version management, so I can say which version needed to go where. And we needed links to see what was needed in what shot, what was needed in what asset, sub-assets, variants, etc. And yeah, this kind of answers the question of, so how do we know what to sync and where to? We didn't. It's kind of as simple as that. But one of the things we were talking about when we came off for David was, how do we fix this? And in the white paper, you would have seen 2 of the things that we had to take was database of knowing what's where, and also a proper USD resolver. And that is kind of what AYON gave us with asset URIs and entity links, and that coupled with our previous iterations of knowing the context, etc. We can build out quite a substantial improvement on our current system, which will reduce the sync latency between all of our regions, just make the artists happier. If people don't have to wait for things if there's a rigger in Cape Town and they're trying to iterate on something for an animator in US West, for example, they don't have to wait, they become more productive. Our owner Phil will be happy that we decrease our AWS costs and that we decrease our network transfer. There's a whole bunch of knock-on effects of these things, but yeah, we're extremely excited about the next iteration of things, the future, and we currently in quite heavy development of this for our current feature film. And yeah, back to Tim.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so just in closing, I suppose, is as Chris alluded to, we are 12 months into our next feature film. It's at the same scale as David. That's great news for us as a studio. It's also terrifying news for us as a technical organization because we know what that feels like, and we're very thankful to be partnered with AYON on this next feature, and we feel like we've made a very good choice. We are 6 months in to our adoption of AYON. We've just started layout on the new feature. We're 90 days from animation going to prime time, so we're going to learn some lessons over the next 3-4 months. But we've been putting down some good foundations. Yeah, you can just jump along, Chris, Kev, and let that run. We've got a little bit of time, I think, and I'd love to open the floor for Q&A. I think maybe just the thing to say in closing is what you've hopefully heard from each of us today is we really do endeavor to operate in a best practices methodology, operating at the scale that Sunrise is at, in the market it's in, accepting that our recruitment and spread of artists is going to see us have lighters in LA and India and Australia and Cape Town, and we need to make that work. And as much as we want to talk to HR about that and discuss locality of hiring, it's just not practical for a studio of our scale. And so instead we need to turn to our pipeline, to our sync platform, and make sure that we can support that. So let's open up the floor. If anyone's got any questions about anything at all, about any of the things we've said. Should we send a mic back? Do you want to send one back? There are two.
I'm happy to run around. There was a question.
Thanks. I was wondering, as you were using the AYON USD resolver, were there any downsides of using it? Like, I don't know, for example, not being able to open USD files natively without AYON, or high peaks in querying database or something like this?
What's that, or shall I?
I can say what you say is true. If you're wanting to just kind of dig down a stack of USD files, within an IDE, that makes it a little harder, and you kind of have to manually kind of browse around and look at files. One of the things that we run into is actually the resolver cache within the Houdini session. So you publish, and then you just want to kind of check your publish and see if it's validated. But fortunately, right now you have to restart the DCC so that we can get the new cache of the resolved parts. Anything else?
No, I mean, I can touch on it quickly. A little bit for the farm. It's a little bit of expansion on this. Is like for UC pinning. One issue of using a resolver like live is it's going to hurt your farm if you resolve all those links every bit of the time. But like the farmers have, you'd use UC pin files, which is a static cache of the entire thing that the farm would read. So if it caches the entire thing up front once, you cache it at submission or publish or whenever, and then the farm just reads static file paths.
Yeah, and that's not a downside. That's just something that we're doing next.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to get back to the same topic, if you have entity URIs in your USD files and you need to ship them to another vendor, it's quite trivial with the USD API to modify your USD scenes and flatten that to like a relative path. So what you would do is you would essentially take the path that you have, resolve them at runtime with your resolver, and then essentially package it up and say, okay, make everything relative, or even move the files and change the paths along. So that would be the package you would ship to other vendors.
Yes, please. Something about handling LODs and model variants. Are you then using a nested variants, or like, because sometimes you have different model variants, but each model variant has its own LOD probably. So how do you handle those?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our asset. Let's go back to this guy. Maybe this will help. Maybe the zoomed in one, right? Our asset. Let's say we have a particular species of tree, like an acacia tree. That acacia tree is going to have, a couple of different model variants, and each of those model variants will have a couple of LODs. Let's just go to where we look at LODs, so I can talk through it. Yeah. Right. So here you see we've got the model product at the top, and the LED product is underneath that. And yes, inside of that product there is a variant set called LOD, and it's LOD 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, nested, and they all that nests up into the model, and that the model nests up into the acacia tree small, which will then come up into the main asset, which is just acacia tree. And then we kind of have a further, what we're doing is there's an actual task that we call modification, which is essentially just a collection of choices for an asset in a shot. So, this asset uses the base model and the dirty look and the messy groom, and that's what makes up, that thing. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Sounds like not. Thank you very much, guys. It was a pleasure working with you, and thank you for the presentation. It's great. For everyone in the room, if you would like any t-shirts, we have all sizes and all colors. Please come, talk to us, get some. If you stick around for the next session, it's going to be a set of new integrations that we have that we're going to be presenting. There's Comfy UI, OpenRV, a bunch of others. So stick around for that if you want to see a little bit more of what's happening on the pipeline side. Thank you very much, and thank you, guys.